March 6, 1944, one tail gunner faced 12 BF-109s and chose to strike first. Everything shifted. While every manual said wait and defend, Donovan fired at fighters still forming their attack line. They scattered. From the cursed tail seat, he fired early bursts that broke German timing before the fight began. They hesitated. In minutes, his non-stop fire shattered formation discipline and flipped an organized attack into chaos. Order collapsed. With each burst, he pushed the Luftwaffe off balance by using fear instead of perfect accuracy or doctrine. They cracked. When his guns finally ran dry, 12 fighters were down and the rest were fleeing from one tail gunner. History shifted. Michael Donovan grew up in the hard neighborhoods of South Boston, where fistfights, close calls, and street survival shaped his instinct long before he ever touched a machine gun. Every bruise taught him that waiting meant taking the first hit, but moving early kept you standing. Those rough lessons followed him into the war, guiding the way he handled danger thousands of feet above Europe. When Pearl Harbor was attacked, Donovan didn't hesitate for even a breath. He marched into the recruiting office and refused the ground jobs they tried to hand him, insisting he wanted combat and nothing less. He didn't want a toolbox or a workshop, he wanted altitude, gunfire, and a clear line on the enemy. For him, the war wasn't something to support. It was something to fight. At gunnery school, Donovan stood out the moment he grabbed the training guns. Instructors said he leaned out too far, opened fire too early, and acted like he was fighting for real instead of practicing. But he knew hesitation killed, not mistakes of aggression. While others waited for perfect alignment, Donovan pulled the trigger first. Risky or not, that instinct always kept him alive. Most students were praised for tight groupings and perfect textbook accuracy, but Donovan earned attention for something far more valuable: speed. He could find a target, lead it, and fire before others even finished adjusting their stance. Accuracy could be taught, but instinctive timing couldn't. Donovan wasn't the neatest gunner in training, yet everyone knew he was the one you wanted behind a .50 cal. When he arrived at Framlingham in early 1944, Donovan learned his bomber, the B-17 Hell's Fury, already carried a cursed reputation. The tail gun position had been nearly blown off twice, and the last gunner barely survived. Most crews avoided that seat entirely, but Donovan didn't flinch. The moment he heard they needed someone new, he stepped forward without hesitation. Risk never scared him. Waiting did. Captain Whitmore, the pilot, tried to warn him. Tail gunners had the highest fatality rate in the entire 8th Air Force, with nearly 4 in 10 never finishing their tour. Donovan listened, shrugged, and answered with the same confidence he carried into every fight back home. "Then I've got 6 in 10 odds," he said. "I'll take them." Whitmore knew he'd found someone different. Donovan's first mission proved exactly who he was. While other gunners waited for German fighters to close in, he opened fire the moment enemy aircraft began forming their attack line behind the formation. It wasn't standard procedure, but the effect was immediate. The German pilots scattered before they could make a clean run. The crew didn't understand the tactic yet, but they couldn't argue with results. When they landed, the crew chief marched straight toward Donovan, furious that he'd burned through nearly 80% of his ammunition on a single mission. Donovan didn't blink. He pointed at the untouched fuselage and the uninjured crew and said, "Bullets are cheap. Lives aren't." For the first time, the men realized he wasn't reckless, he simply calculated risk differently than everyone else. That night in the barracks, Donovan didn't bother celebrating. He sat alone with mission photos and diagrams, studying how German fighters approached, where their discipline held, and where it broke. He didn't care about defense, he wanted to hit them at the exact second their formation was most fragile. If he could find that moment, he could stop an attack before it ever started. The more he studied, the clearer the flaw in American doctrine became. Everything they taught focused on reacting after the Germans committed, giving the enemy full control of timing. Donovan hated that. He didn't want bombers waiting to be attacked, he wanted attackers forced to rethink their plan. To him, survival came from seizing the first moment, not waiting for the perfect one. During the briefing for the March 6 Augsburg mission, the aircrew was warned to expect heavy resistance. 800 bombers were heading deep into Germany, and the Luftwaffe wasn't going to let them pass quietly. After the meeting, Donovan approached Captain Whitmore and requested permission to use his aggressive fire idea. The pilot wasn't convinced, but Donovan was determined to prove it worked. Whitmore reminded him that tail gunners were supposed to conserve ammunition and fire only when fighters came close. Donovan disagreed. If we wait, they choose the fight, he said. If we shoot first, maybe they never get the chance. The pilot stared at him, weighing the risk, then finally nodded. One mission, he said. If we get shredded, you're off the guns. Donovan accepted instantly. Hell's Fury lifted off before sunrise, the engines shaking frost from the wings as the bomber climbed into a pale gray sky. The formation built slowly over England, hundreds of B-17s gathering for the long flight toward Germany. As they crossed the channel, Donovan settled into the tail seat, every instinct sharpening. He knew the Luftwaffe would come. The only question was when. At 9:19, the warning echoed through the intercom, "Fighters 6 o'clock high." Donovan swung his twin .50s around and spotted 12 Bf-109s sliding into a perfect formation 2,000 yards behind the bombers. They weren't attacking yet, they were organizing. Standard doctrine said to wait for them to close. Donovan rejected that instantly. Formation meant vulnerability, and he planned to break it immediately. Without waiting for approval, Donovan pressed the triggers and sent long bursts ripping through the empty sky at maximum range. Most rounds missed, but that didn't matter. The German formation instantly fractured, pilots dodging reflexively instead of committing to their attack. In one move, Donovan destroyed the timing they needed. Behind him, the intercom erupted with confusion, but the effect spoke louder than words. Captain Whitmore shouted for him to cease fire, warning he was wasting ammunition, but Donovan ignored the call. "Negative, sir," he replied calmly. "Watch them." Out the tail window, the once organized formation twisted into hesitation, uncertainty, and broken angles. The Germans were no longer dictating the battle. Donovan had grabbed control with nothing but timing and nerve. The first attack run was already dead. But one German pilot didn't scare so easily. A bold wingman peeled away from the scattered formation and dove directly toward Hell's Fury, guns ready. Donovan recognized the posture. This was a veteran who wouldn't hesitate. He held his fire, letting the fighter close, 1,400 yards, 1,200, 1,000. Then he unleashed a solid stream of .50 caliber fire that tore straight through its engine. The German fighter tried to break away, but Donovan's barrage cut through metal faster than the pilot could react. The Bf-109 rolled inverted, trailing smoke before exploding into scattered fragments. The radio operator shouted the confirmation, but Donovan didn't celebrate. He immediately scanned for new threats, knowing the first kill always triggered a harder counterstrike. The fight was far from finished. The remaining fighters regrouped quickly, splitting into two disciplined teams, 6 coming from straight behind and 5 angling in from 7 o'clock. Most tail gunners tried to track both sides, dividing their focus and weakening their fire. Donovan refused that mistake. "Waist gunners, you've got 7, he called. "I'm holding 6. By narrowing his focus, he forced the German pilots into predictable patterns. The 6 fighters from the rear closed in fast, diving in a tight, disciplined line. Donovan locked onto the lead aircraft and fired, watching the fighter burst apart in flame. Without hesitation, he shifted to the next, then the next. His timing was precise, each burst forcing the following pilots into panic. In less than half a minute, 3 Bf-109s were gone. For a moment, the sky fell quiet. Then the second wave arrived, 18 fighters coming in from 4 directions. It was the classic Luftwaffe swarm, meant to overwhelm every gun on a bomber at once. Donovan ignored the chaos. He locked onto the group at 6 o'clock, the most dangerous angle, and opened fire at extreme range. He forced experienced pilots to dodge before they even attacked. At their closing speed, Donovan had barely 7 seconds before the fighters reached lethal distance. He used every second. He walked his tracers directly into the flight path of the lead Bf-109, giving the pilot no room to evade without abandoning the attack. The fighter held course a moment too long, and Donovan's rounds shredded its canopy and engine, sending it spiraling downward in smoke. As the second fighter fell, Donovan immediately shifted to the next target, firing where the aircraft would be instead of where it was. The German pilot flew straight into the stream of .50 caliber rounds and vanished in a burst of flame. With 2 kills in seconds, Donovan had shattered the rhythm of the entire attack. Fear, not strategy, now guided the enemy's movements. But the sky only grew darker. More fighters appeared, dozens of them forming a massive assault that stretched across the horizon. 40 or more German aircraft circled the bomber formation, waiting for a coordinated moment to strike. Hell's Fury had drifted too far from the group, leaving Donovan nearly alone. He checked his ammunition. More than half was gone. The odds were turning fast. The German fighters began locking into a perfectly timed formation that would hit Hell's Fury from multiple angles at once. If they finished organizing, the bomber wouldn't survive the first pass. Donovan recognized the pattern instantly. "Captain, let me hit them now," he called, while they're forming. Whitmore hesitated, then finally answered, "Do it." Donovan's fingers tightened around the triggers. Timing was everything. Donovan aimed not at a single aircraft, but at the center of the German pattern, the exact point where coordination tightened. He fired long bursts into the empty space the fighters used to align. The effect was immediate and violent. One Bf-109 burst into smoke, and two others clipped wings trying to dodge. The massive formation disintegrated into chaos before the attack even started. Pilots shouted warnings over German radio channels, the orderly assault collapsing into scattered dives and evasive turns. Donovan watched from the tail as confusion spread through the sky. They weren't attacking, they were trying not to collide with each other. In seconds, 40 disciplined fighters had turned into a panicked swarm. It was the exact outcome he'd studied, planned, and waited for since his first mission. But the Germans weren't done yet. After regrouping at a distance, a fresh wave of fighters peeled off and dived straight toward Hell's Fury. Donovan checked his remaining belts, barely a few hundred rounds left. He didn't spread them out. Instead, he aimed at the densest part of the swarm, firing controlled bursts that punched directly into their confidence, forcing pilots to break formation mid-attack. His final belt ran out as three more fighters peeled away, smoke trailing behind them. Donovan called over the intercom, "Tail guns empty." But the Germans didn't know it. He kept his sights locked on the lead attacker, tracking perfectly as if fully loaded. The pilot panicked first, braking hard right. The rest followed, abandoning the attack entirely. Empty guns won the final duel. Hell's Fury completed its bombing run, turned for home, and limped across the channel riddled with holes. Yet every crew member was alive. Word of Donovan's defense spread across bomber groups within hours. 12 confirmed kills, 21 fighters driven off, and a doctrine rewritten mid-air. His aggression became a lesson every gunner would study. Survival doesn't come from waiting. It comes from firing first.